you talked a little bit about your journey. You want to touch a little bit more on that, of like how you got to this place and why you feel so passionate about it?
Yeah, I'd love to. So I started drinking when I was 16. I would sneak alcohol out of my parents' liquor cabinet, and we'd top it off with water. And it was just kind of my way to rebel. Luckily they kept it in the liquor cabinet and not in the freezer like some of my other friends' parents, because he learned that water does freeze. I was rebelling, right? I was the straight A student. I never got in trouble. I didn't do anything wrong. And so this was kind of my chance to do something. I mean, it wasn't like we were doing it every night. It would be very obvious if we were doing this, but just, when you're bored teenagers, stuff like this would happen. Then I went to college. I went to one of the most Greek universities in the country, and one of the most affluent universities in the country. So there was a lot of money and a lot of the fraternity parties and everything. So there was just drinking all the time. And I felt like I was just being a normal college student at that point. Like, yes, you drink on Thursdays and Fridays, and there were parties always to go to, and I would even plan out my schedules based on kind of knowing that I'm not going to be feeling my best in the morning. Like, I was 1 credit short of minoring in statistics, but the last class I needed was 8 a.m. on Fridays. And there's no way, because we always go out Thursday night. Like, I'm not going to be at class at 8 a.m. on Friday. Wow. So I just skipped it. But it didn't seem weird to me, because everybody else was doing it too. I wasn't hanging out with people that would choose to spend their weekends, at home playing board games. We were going out. So it didn't really feel like a problem. I noticed it was a problem when I started getting depressed. The first time I was depressed, I was studying abroad in Australia, and I think it was just maybe the big change in moving places and leaving behind my support system and everything. And so when I was there, I had a box of wine under my desk in my room, and I would just be drinking all day long. Like, that was just kind of how I would cope. And then I got back to the States, got on some antidepressants, and then I would say my alcohol use returned to normal, right? So drinking on the weekends, at events, stuff like that, but not necessarily kind of all day, every day. But then I had a couple more bouts of depression after that. I went to law school, finished law school, but I hated it. I knew this was not what I was meant to do, but I'm a finisher. I'm that good student. So I went all the way through and passed the bar exam, but I was really miserable at that time. And so I was also using alcohol to cope there. And then again, and it was just kind of that cycle of drinking, not drinking, drinking, not drinking. And eventually I moved to Switzerland. My husband is Swiss, and so we were there for 5 years. And at that point, my depression got so bad that I actually had to be hospitalized.
Oh.
And while I was there, it wasn't a lockdown ward, like it was a depression ward, but we were kind of free to go. It was a inpatient outpatient situation, and so you had to stay there during the week, but then on the weekends you could go home. And sometimes during the day, I would sneak out not even sneak, I just would walk out to the corner store down the street to buy beer or vodka to kind of take back to my room. Like, so even when I was at my absolute lowest and I knew, I had done research that alcohol is bad for depression, I still couldn't stop. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't until I tried dry January that I decided that this really was a problem, and I was kind of ready to acknowledge that. I did a dry January 4 or 5 years ago, maybe, and drank 3 times in there. And I thought, okay, but that one time it was so-and-so's birthday, and one time it was just a really hard day at work, so those don't count. And I did dry January a couple more times, and I made it through one time without drinking with the whole 31 days, and I was miserable. I was thinking about alcohol every single day, and that scared me.
Yeah.
So it was at that point that I started to realize that I need help. Like, if I can't go 31 days without being completely miserable, then there's something stronger here. I'm just not going to be able to do it on my own.
Wow. What a journey.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm glad you were able to get some help, and we can talk about the next steps. What comes to mind as you're telling the story is we just finished reading a book by one of the friends of our podcast, Joanna Hardis, called Just Do Nothing. And she talks about people not willing to feel uncomfortable. And that when you're in that moment of unease or discomfort, often people turn to something to numb out. And it sounds to me like, I'm not going to diagnose you. I'm not in any way qualified for any of that. But it kind of made me think of that. And that, alcohol can be that social lubricant. It can be the thing if you're bored and you just want to do something on the weekend, or in the evenings or something, or take the edge off if you're stressed, or if you're just like literally having discomfort in your life and you don't want to deal with it. It's a way to tune it out.
It is, but we forget that it's just a temporary way to
That's
tune it out,
right.
right? It's a
Yeah.
band-aid. And
Yeah.
those feelings can be so big and so scary, but they're not going away. And I heard it once described as someone's kind of, you're pushing down a beach ball in the water, and you can
Oh,
keep doing
yeah.
it, but there's that pressure there, and it's gonna shoot up at some point. So really what you're doing is kind of choosing whether you want to have things hard now or hard later. Because if you continue to choose alcohol for every negative feeling that you're going to have medical issues, or those feelings are going to bubble up in a really uncontainable way. Like, it's going to get harder at some point. So you can either deal with it now or deal with it later. And we forget that we're causing that future version of ourselves so much pain. You know, even when we kind of know alcohol's not great for me, it's that immediate gratification that I'm looking for. I know it's going to make me a little less stressed. I know that it's going to make me feel a little bit more confident talking to people. And we don't realize that we're kind of jeopardizing that future version of ourselves. So if we said no to drinking when we go out to network, we can actually build up the skills to be more confident to speak with people when we go out, to not need alcohol, and to kind of develop that confidence there. But if we rely on that crutch, we're just kind of penalizing that future version of ourselves.